1, so 21 minutes left of this hour, and we always strive here on Afternoon Edition to bring you some of the most unique and interesting individuals on planet Earth. But even for us, this is a first, because my next guest, alongside his mother, is not 1 in a million, not even 1 in a billion. He is, and he's gassed on this, 1 in 7 billion. Deryn Blackwell was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 10. 18 months later, he developed another rare form of cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma. He was the only person in the world known to be fighting Langerhans alongside another cancer, making him, as I said, 1 in 7 billion. At one point, his mother was told he only had 4 days left to live on planet Earth. His mother, Callie Blackwell, has now written a book, The Boy in 7 Billion, about their experiences, and Callie and Deryn are with us, and we're so happy that both of you are here.
Hi.
Not
Hello.
just because you're 1 in 7 billion, Deryn, but because your mum has the greatest colour of hair in the world right now. And you, yourself, Deryn, at one point did have a little pink Mohican going on, didn't you?
Yes, I've had many different coloured Mohicans.
That's a big look. The Mohican, the pink. It was a photo, I think, with you and Russell Howard I saw.
Yeah.
When you had that particularly swagged out pink hairdo. It was very good indeed. So firstly, welcome to 5 Live. Thank you so much
Thanks for having us.
joining us. Callie, I've got to start with you. I mean, tell me about the range of emotions, or indeed the most powerful emotion that you went through when not only your son had leukemia, but then you discovered 18 months later that he'd developed this other rare form of cancer.
The second diagnosis is actually harder than the first one. I suppose it's because we knew at that point what was in store for us. When your child is first diagnosed with cancer, it's incredibly frightening, and everything happens very quickly. And I liken it to getting onto a roller coaster ride that you never bought a ticket for, and you can't get off. And it becomes very quick, and it encompasses everything, your entire life. Then when you go through 18 months, and he went through the first 18 months. There were a few issues, which are, I talk about in the book. But it was 18 months later when, they told us this is a secondary cancer. And actually, I say that was harder. We both broke down, both myself and my husband, Deryn. He was absolutely nonplussed, the same as he is now. He's very much all the way through this journey dealt with, well, it is what it is, it's happening, and we've just got to deal with it. So the second diagnosis, knowing exactly what was probably going to be in store for us with bone marrow transplants, more chemotherapy, more radiotherapy, we were absolutely terrified. And also they could give us not even any idea of a prognosis because they had never seen it before. So
completely uncharted territory.
Absolutely, yeah, no protocol at all.
So how did the doctors find out that he was 1 in 7 billion, Callie?
Well, it was kind of a collaboration between myself and the doctors, where I started to research and started to look for other cases of Langerhans cell sarcoma, and the doctors were doing a similar thing, but talking to, obviously, their consultants all around the world. And I went to the doctor and I said, look, these are the people that I found. And they said, yeah, that's pretty much all we found. And I said, well, so does this make him incredibly rare? And they said, well, there's only been 50 cases documented since records began, and you haven't found anybody that we haven't already found. So it really does seem that he is the only one in the world to be dealing with these two cancers. And so from there, it was very much the doctors were sending slices of his tonsils to all over the world to try and get him diagnosed. They were bringing in ideas from all over the world as to what to actually do with him. And obviously they settled on a bone marrow transplant.
And Deryn, the way that you've taken all of this in your stride is incredible. And I've seen interviews with you, Ray. You're just so chilled out about it. So when you were 10, did you realise what was happening, what the diagnosis meant?
Well, when I was 10, I had no idea what leukemia even was. So when I asked my mum, she told me that it was just a blood cancer, and that was it. Just hearing the word cancer just set me off. But then it was only you were only able to process your emotions for about half an hour because you get swept up in the ambulances, all the needles and all sorts of stuff. You don't have time to process.
No, I can imagine. Deryn, how did your friends react to it? Because I can imagine you had quite a crew of mates at school.
Yeah. Well,
how do you tell them?
I'm not sure how they get how they processed it, but they all seemed all right. they just like because of the steroids, I got a really big face. So as soon as I went back to school, like everyone was poking it, asking if it was hurting, and that was
Not
how they.
awkward at all.
No, not really.
So then, of course, 18 months later, this happens. And while you may have never heard of blood cancer leukemia before, you certainly wouldn't have heard of Langerhans cell sarcoma.
No.
None of us did either,
No.
until we started finding out more about you and your mum. So then what?
Well, I just took it in my stride because I'd already had 18 months of treatment, so I sort of knew roughly what was going on, of what I was going to be in for, just long hospital stays, all that, and I was all right with that because I just got to sit in bed all day.
And you're there, Callie, thinking, right, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? So how much surgery and how many bone marrow transplants did Deryn actually undergo? And treatments?
From the beginning, I can't even tell you how many surgeries, but just for his secondary cancer alone, he had 2 quite extensive surgeries on his throat. Because it was his tonsils that actually had turned into the tumours, so he had those removed, and then we found it had spread into the back of his throat and on part of his soft palate. So he lost a little bit of his soft palate as well, which causes all sorts of funny problems. Even now, water comes out of his nose, or food gets stuck up there sometimes. So it's his party trick now. But it was so the 2 surgeries there were kind of fairly straightforward, and then it was 5 months of intensive chemotherapy, and then we went to Bristol, where we had to have intensive radiotherapy. They call it conditioning. It's 12 days where they totally strip out the bone marrow. And then he had the first transplant on March the 1st, 2013. And subsequently, they kept failing due to, actually 2 of them failed due to unforeseen circumstances, a circumstance they'd never actually seen before. So his 3rd one failed, and he had a 4th, which obviously they told us had also failed, which left us in the predicament of going to a hospice.
That was Last Chance Saloon.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They had nothing left to give him, no other options.
And that's the point, Deryn, when you started to plan your own funeral.
Yeah, I'd started to plan it in the hospital towards the end. Yeah.
So what were the plans?
Well, I wanted.
It's a very surreal thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. It was weird, but it was helpful as well because I got to control everything about it. So it was going to be fancy dress. I wanted to be cremated, and I wanted to be put in a firework and shot out of a cannon in Greece.
Why Greece?
Because we went on a holiday there, and I really liked it. So.
And Callie, can I just ask how do you get through this? Because you're saying that Deryn kind of deals with it all, including planning his own funeral, very much in his stride. But I'm a parent, Sarah's a parent, you're a parent. What got you through this?
Deryn, if I'm totally honest, he didn't allow us to get upset. We'd go and have the talks with the consultants in the room, and they tell us, we're going to turn over every stone, but we are running drastically out of stones here. And when it got to the last, there's nothing more we can do. Simon and myself were absolutely devastated. And I remember walking back into his hospital room, and he said, "What did they say then?" And I said, "They said that's it." And he went, "All right then. So when we go into the hospice," and it was so, we if he could be like that, then who are we to drag him down by, being upset and crying? Literally stamping your feet and crying makes no difference to anything. So you have to just get on with it. You have to deal with everything. You didn't do it
at all, or you went and did it away from him?
There was, I think, 2 occasions where we went away from him and stamped our feet and cried somewhat. But actually, most of the time, it was very. I suppose listening to my story now, when you hear it in a one-er, it's very, very hard hitting. But you have to remember, this was 4 years of our life. So, by the time we got to the point where, okay, he's going to die, it was like, okay, well, we knew that 4 years ago that was a possibility. And then again, with the second cancer, we knew it was a possibility. So it's something that's always been there in the back of your mind. Obviously, you don't want it ever to come to that, but it's always something there. So it was never really a surprise. So I guess it was just a moment by moment, and we just dealt with it the kind of best we could.
But when you finally asked them how long he's got, it did come as a surprise to you how quick it was that they were giving you. What did they say?
Well, effectively, he was on what I would call a conscious life support machine. So they told me that it was just the antibiotics that were keeping him alive now. He had 3 catastrophic infections and obviously no immune system whatsoever.
He caught his fingers down the side of the bed.
Yeah, 3 days after his last transplant, I could have slapped him for that. I just asked, oh my God, no. And yeah, so he got this infection, 2 in his hand, 1 in his mouth, and just such bad timing. And obviously his bone marrow just couldn't do anything with these infections ravaging him. So I said to them, okay, well, how long are we talking? When I unplug him, how long? And the doctor said 3 days, at most a week. And that was a shock. I wasn't really expecting it to be that quick.
How do you say to your son 3 days left?
Yeah, I had to tell him when we went back in the room. I had to tell him, they're saying 3 days. And he said, oh, okay, well, we better get Christmas out of the way then. So we had Christmas on December the 14th, 3 days after we went to the hospice.
Deryn, at that stage, were you ready to go?
Not totally, no. It was after like a week or 2 in the hospice that I finally accepted it. I was still sort of denying it because I didn't want to be wrong.
Yeah, he was adamant all the way through treatment. He was adamant that he wasn't going to die all the way through. And so a couple of weeks into the hospice, and they said he's definitely there's nothing in his bone marrow, he's definitely going to die. Deryn actually turned to me and said, do you know what, I'm more annoyed that I'm going to be wrong. He said, I was so sure that I wasn't going to die. I can't believe I'm going to be wrong. And that really upset him, actually.
Yeah.
Well, that's a quality that will be good for the rest of your life. Don't worry about that. You keep with that quality. But of course, you didn't give up.
No.
Right? So why, I guess, didn't you get up? It sounds like a silly question to ask a parent. As a parent, you should never give up. But you've been told by medical science, and ultimately we have to rely on medical science, don't we?
Yes.
That's it. That's as far as we can go. So what did you start doing?
I started administering a cannabis tincture that we had made probably a month or so beforehand. We'd actually made it initially to put in just a normal vape pen, the pens that people walk around with everywhere. We initially just made it to put in there in the hope that it would alleviate some of his anxiety and some of the pain he was experiencing from these infections that he had in his hand. But it wasn't strong enough, really. I mean, it gave him a bit of a placebo, and he was able to, take some comfort from it, but it just wasn't strong enough to do anything. So when we got to day 70, and I'd had, again, another meeting and said, he's still here. Nobody's ever engrafted after 50 days, apparently. So at day 70, he's still there, and I said, right, I need a bone marrow aspirate. They did one. Came back absolutely nothing in there. This was day 70, and Deryn then started to get quite anxious. They started to up the morphine, introduce sleeping tablets, things like that. Things that Deryn had been very vocal that in his death plan that he'd made with the doctors, he said, I don't want to go out on morphine. So I just thought, well, I'll just put something in his mouth. What's the worst it can do? It's not going to kill him. So we just tried that, and within half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, he just changed. His whole demeanour changed. He wasn't panicking. He was waking up and screaming in the night that he just wanted to die.
This is this cannabis-based product?
Yes. Yeah. So it was only 5 ml, and it wasn't an incredibly strong tincture either. But the effect that it had on him almost immediately, was enough for me to want to just carry it on.
And this was a medical procedure that had been done in other parts of the world? You just read up about this?
Yeah, I mean, cannabis is available in America. Obviously, I think it's 21 or 23 states now.
It's actually everything but 5 states now.
It is.
Yeah.
See, yeah, it's. And I have a friend in America who, her son was diagnosed with an incredibly kind of really bad cancer. At quite a young age, and was told his prognosis was about 2% or something. And he was actually prescribed cannabis oil by his doctor to help alleviate his chemotherapy side effects. And it did a wonderful job. And he didn't have the whole plethora of other drugs that we give to people in this country. He just had cannabis oil and his chemotherapy, and he's still alive now. And he's doing so fantastically well. And so looking online and seeing so much anecdotal and, scientific research into it, I just thought, it's got to, I know there's something in this for alleviating his anxiety and helping him with his sleep. That's really the only reason I gave it, to alleviate that immediate suffering. I didn't expect it to do what it did. No way.
Deryn, do you remember how you felt the first time your mum gave it to you?
Yeah, I do. I remember before it was one of my, I had a little panic attack. So Mum gave it to me, and after 10 minutes, I think, I started to feel something. But yeah, after half an hour, I was mellow. I felt fine. I wasn't freaking out or anything. I was just calm.
And Callie, for you then, there's one thing when your son's demeanour changed, there's quite another when an extraordinary medical turnaround seems to happen as well. What happened?
So I continued to give this tincture because it was helping, and I thought, well, if he can go out palliative care-wise, if he can die like this, then, it's a win-win for all of us. It's exactly what we all wanted. So 5 days later, when his bandage came off his hand, which they told us that his hands was completely necrotic, and people from at the time may remember pictures that I posted of his fingers, and his fingers they'd healed, and they told us there's no way your fingers can even heal without functioning bone marrow. So the fact his fingers were nice and pink, the doctors then started panicking. One of the children's doctors came in from Bristol and did a blood test, and his immune system was there. His bone marrow was starting to work.
Just incredible. Now, you don't say, do you, that is a direct result? You weren't entirely sure that it was of that. I mean, is there any medical proof now that it was because of that?
What's the explanation the doctors have given you for what happened?
The doctors called him a miracle.
That's the only thing they could say?
Yeah.
They cannot explain at all what happened?
No. I asked them at the time, could this be anything that you've given him? And they said, no, absolutely not. He was literally on palliative, which is pain care.
End of life.
End of life. So they're not giving any. We signed all the do not resuscitate forms, so there was no way they were intervening in any way to keep him alive. So I actually, when that happened, I thought, is this a coincidence? I don't know. I have to know for sure whether this is a coincidence. So I started to manipulate the amount I gave him and when I gave it to him, and I watched a direct correlation. When I didn't give it to him, his bloods would half, and when I did give it to him, they would double. So, and I watched that over about 6 or 7 blood counts.
And once you presented that to a medical professional, what did they say to you?
I didn't. I only told them last week. I couldn't bring myself to tell them. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was going to lose my children.
Because it is illegal in this country.
Yeah. So I kept it quiet.
So behind closed doors, off the record, has the medical profession said anything to you about this coincidence?
Yeah, they have. I've spoken to them now. I've spoken to 2 of Deryn's doctors, ones we're incredibly close to, and both of them said they can't advocate it, obviously, and they can't say for sure because they don't have the evidence in front of them, but they're both happy that it's probably not likely a coincidence, and they said that they support me in what I did because ultimately I was a mother at the end of the road. There was nothing more that conventional medicine could give me. Both doctors said that we were very compliant. We did everything that they asked us to do. We literally got to the point where they could do no more. And so he said, both doctors said, he's still here. I'm glad you did what you did.
Has there been any tests anywhere in the world with regards to what Deryn went through? Is there any scientific data being done anywhere?
As its effect against the immune system, I'm not entirely sure. I know there's an awful lot of research going into, obviously, MS, epilepsy. It's been proven to work amazingly against those 2 illnesses. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of research going on in Madrid. Dr. Christine Sanchez and Professor Guzman as well, both in Madrid University, working with full extract plant and gliomas, and they're finding absolutely fantastic results from that. So there's an awful lot of research going into a whole range of illnesses, but whether there's some going into just purely his kind of a bone marrow, I'm not sure. But I know that I've spoken to a lot of people who find that they are much healthier when they're consuming cannabis on a regular basis.
We just found out from NICE, the NHS rationing watchdog, they've told us that they've not been asked to produce any guidance on Bedrocan. That was the one you used, wasn't it?
Bedrocan.
No, it's a different one, is it?
Yeah, Bedrocan was a drug that I asked for in the hospital, actually, when Deryn was in so much pain with his hand, and he was on fentanyl at the time. They couldn't go any higher.
Fentanyl's like a really hardcore opiate.
Yeah, you can't go any higher than fentanyl. And it wasn't working, and he was just he was like a zombie. And so I said to the doctor, I've looked at this drug, it's called Bedrocan, it's a painkiller, it's licensed in Europe, we can get a prescription, we can just go and get it. And she said, I can't, it's not licensed for children. So we were then, it was a dead end.
Deryn, tell me about your hopes and aspirations now. Now that you have a second chance at life. I mean, I'm sure you don't waste a minute of the day. I hope you're not lying in bed hanging out all the time now, my friend.
I wouldn't blame you if you were.
He
No,
is.
I would seize the day.
Tell him, Neil. Tell him.
You know, it's your 17-year-old. Go and seize life.
Yes.
Carpe diem, my friend. So tell me, what's your hopes and aspirations for the future?
Well, in the long run, I hope to open a vegan American 50s diner. That's
Awesome.
very
what I
niche.
That's got to be a first.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just make sure you tell us when, and we'll come for the opening.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Listen,
that's
my
amazing.
goodness.
It's amazing
Fair
to speak
play
to
to
you.
both of you.
Thank
Owen,
you.
Owen has texted in say in tears listening. Thank you for being brave enough to air this out. Big respect to you guys, and even more to the family. Obviously, even more to the family. Only to the family.
Thanks, Owen.
And Deryn, remember, the older and older you get, the bigger and bigger a firework you'll have to buy when eventually you pass away. And
Another rocket.
yeah, you have to get a rocket.
Have to go to Mars. That'll be it. Listen, thank you both so much, Callie Blackwell and
Thank you.
Deryn Blackwell.
Thank you.